All so much for coming. My name is Caitlin, and I would just like to give a super quick shout out to the Crypto Mondays London team. Can everybody raise their hand? This is Larry, my co-founder over here, Emma, Nash, Robin, Rohit up here. You guys might know him. Everybody who helps out with Crypto Mondays London is a volunteer, so they give their time really generously. So thank you, everybody. We don't ask for a lot here at Crypto Mondays, but I would like to ask one small favor. You guys could scan this QR code, and if you're not already, follow us on X. We lost access to our account like 2 years ago, and we're trying to build it back up. So if you could please help us out, we would be very grateful. Okay, next slide. Okay. Okay, so you guys might have noticed these branded water cans that we have around the place. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Stand with Crypto. Raise your hand if you guys have heard of Stand with Crypto. Okay, that's amazing. So Stand with Crypto was an initiative that was spearheaded by Coinbase, initially in the US, to sort of combat the really heavy-handed SEC regulations that were going on, really stifling a lot of the innovation. So now there is a new movement here in the UK, again, spearheaded by Coinbase. I am an ambassador for Stand with Crypto, and I'm really excited to try and get as many people in the industry involved as possible. So if you guys could, if you are interested, this is just to express your interest in the movement. There's no agenda or ask here. It's really just to make sure that our voices, those of us who are builders in the space, are being heard by policymakers and the government. So thank you so much, Stand with Crypto. We have Susanna here. Susanna, can you give us a wave? She's a hi. Because it's also supported by Flight 3. So very grateful. Thank you, guys. Okay, as always, huge thank you to our sponsors. We are a nonprofit, so we could not host these free events with free food, free venue, free everything else if it wasn't for our sponsors. So we've got SUI, we've got ICP, Vault 12, Kudos, London Blockchain Conference, Economy, and of course, our beautiful venue sponsor, Reed Smith. So I know we've got Keish here from ICP. Keish, do you want to come up and just say a quick word? Do you guys know Keish? Say hi, Keish.
Hello.
Hi, Keish.
Hello. How's everyone doing today? Everyone's okay? Okay, good. Nice to meet everyone. My name's Keish. I'm COO of ICP Hub in the UK, and we're proud sponsors of Crypto Mondays London. And yeah, today is all about Bitcoin. But ICP is a layer 0, so we have an interoperability layer, which means that we have connectivity to multiple chains, including Ethereum and Bitcoin, and a few others that I don't know if I get in trouble to mention, but Solana and Ton as well. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here and happy for everyone to be here as well. And yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about what ICP has with the interoperability layer. It's called Chain Fusion. And like I said, it's that capability to connect with multiple blockchains. And I think there's quite a lot of stuff that happens with ICP in the background that not a lot of people know about. So I just wanted to share with you a few projects that uses ICP on the back end, but also has connectivity with Bitcoin. So we have Bitfinity, which is bringing EVM compatibility to Bitcoin. We've got Odin.fun, which is like a token launch platform. I think you guys know what it sounds similar to. I won't mention, but those in Web3 know. And then we have also got a wide range of different projects that are building different infrastructure plays, giving yield on Bitcoin from Bitcoin mining, all these different elements that are all built on ICP. So excited to hear from everyone here today and some of the speakers that are speaking about Bitcoin. And I wanted to give a massive round of applause to everyone that's here. And thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thanks, Keish. Right, so I reckon we should get going because we've got a keynote and we have a stacked panel, which I'm really excited about. So if I could get Chris up here. Chris, if you could give us an intro, and Chris is going to talk us through Bitcoin.
Thank you very much. Just a very quick intro because I'm conscious I've only got 10 minutes. So my name is Christopher Gordon. I'm one of the co-founders of British Bitcoin. We onboard merchants throughout the UK and we assist globally for them to accept Bitcoin payments. But as I say, I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin, the past, present, and the future. So hold on tight. What is Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is different to different people. So I collated a number of different quotes from across the globe. These are Michael Saylor quotes. Bitcoin is digital capital, as an asset, digital gold. Store of value, a distributed ledger, good investment vehicle, insurance, a new hope for the world, a mathematical framework, a currency of resistance, a disruptor to the traditional notions of currency, and money 2.0. These top three quotes are the ones that most align with me, because when we look at the Bitcoin white paper, let's go back, a Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. To me, Bitcoin is money. Now, before Bitcoin, there were a number of cryptocurrencies. You often hear that Bitcoin was the first, but in fact, before Bitcoin, there was 40 years of research and development that came before it. So the Bitcoin white paper, that was published in 31st of October 2008 by Satoshi Nakamoto. It was a pseudonym. We don't know who that was or group of people. Just over 2 months later, the first Bitcoin came into existence. They were digitally mined or minted, and this is the Genesis block. This was the 3rd of January 2009. You'll see circled in that red circle is a headline from the Times on that day, and the headline was "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." We think this is a nod as to why Bitcoin was created. Just over a year later, and this is why we're here today, in 22nd of May 2010, Laszlo spent 10,000 Bitcoin to buy 2 pieces. This is significant because this is the first Bitcoin transaction for a good or a service. So what makes Bitcoin special or unique? I gave a little bit away there. For me, there are 2 fundamental properties. The first is that Bitcoin is finite. It will only ever be 21 million, and it's decentralized. So the perception for most people is that Bitcoin sits within the crypto sphere. It's a subset of crypto. But in actual fact, because of those 2 fundamentals, Bitcoin sits on its own. It's very separate to crypto and fiat. So when we're talking about fiat, fiat's a Latin word, it means by decree. So fiat currency is essentially government issued currencies. And this is really important because with fiat and cryptocurrencies, they're centralized and they're not finite. So you can produce as much as you like. And the problem with that is that leads to inflation, or worse, hyperinflation. So this is the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, and more recently in Zimbabwe, 2008, 2009. Now, I've only got about 6 minutes left. So to signpost you towards Bitcoin to understand it a bit more, I'm going to send you to this website here. Please have a look at satsversusfiat.com. On that, you'll learn about the evolution of money, as well as the problem that Bitcoin solves. You'll learn about what's gone wrong with our fiat money. You'll also learn about how currencies fail and how it also looks like we're potentially on the cusp of a new global reserve currency. Coming to present day, if we group Bitcoin together with cryptocurrencies and measure it by market cap, Bitcoin traditionally has and still does take up over 50% of the market. Looking at it as a return of investment, Bitcoin consistently comes top as an investment return. You'll see in this fidelity table in the top right-hand corner, those orange squares. A couple of quotes: Bitcoin year on year tends to produce about 65 or 62% year on year returns. When we look at Bitcoin as a market cap, it currently sits 6th on the global asset market cap table. You see that just above Google and just below Amazon. So what does this mean for businesses and institutions and companies across the globe? Well, they're sitting up and looking at it. This is one of my co-founders, James. He's here in the audience today. This is him talking to CIMA, the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, last year. James likes to talk about Bitcoin as a money over internet protocol. So given the returns that we've seen in Bitcoin, perhaps it's no surprise that at the beginning of last year, we saw spot Bitcoin ETFs approved in the USA. And they were so popular that the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF was the fastest growth ETF ever. More popular than their gold ETF. If you're interested in that, check out flows.heyapollo.com. Bring it back to the UK. In Q4 last year, we had our first UK pension fund allocate a portion of their fund to Bitcoin. And what we're seeing is businesses across the globe now setting up Bitcoin treasuries. If you're interested in that, check out bitcointreasuries.net. Bring it back to the UK again. Check out a lovely little company called the Smarter Web Company PLC. Not only have they been accepting Bitcoin for a couple of years, they've got a Bitcoin treasury, and they've also just adopted a Bitcoin strategy. So they look like they might be the MicroStrategy of the UK. So the Bitcoin white paper, how does that affect small businesses? Well, we're seeing businesses across the globe starting to accept Bitcoin. I often hear some of these issues. It's slow and it's expensive, and also it's not scalable. But if we think about Bitcoin as a money, we can build on that. We think of Bitcoin as layer one. There are layers above it. So the most popular layer is the Lightning Network. And we can move Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, much like you can move pounds on the Visa or MasterCard network. And when you do that, it's near instant and final settlement. And next to no cost, sometimes no cost. And this is one of the exciting parts of Bitcoin for me, is the number of industries and companies that are building those layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and who knows what layers we go up to. So we're seeing businesses across the UK accept Bitcoin payments. That number's going up pretty much on a daily basis and across the globe. Just last week, 300 more restaurants in the US were added to the maps. And this changes the international remittance industry, Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. As a result, we're seeing Bitcoin circular economies pop up all over the world. Check out Joe Nakamoto, he's got a YouTube channel. He often goes around the world having a look at these Bitcoin circular economies. He's also done a great video on an African village and how Bitcoin mining is enabling some African villages to receive electricity for the first time. Talking about mining and ESG, KPMG released a paper or published a paper in 2023 explaining how Bitcoin can be a net positive for ESG goals globally. Last but by no means least, Bitcoin can play a role in human rights and global empowerment. We've got Susie in the audience today. She's going to be in the panel. She wrote this article. Do check it out to do a deep dive into how Bitcoin can play that important role. So what's the future look like for Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is soaring on a number of metrics. The US have just announced that they're going to have a Bitcoin reserve. Unfortunately, the UK government's lagging a little behind. But Bitcoin Policy UK, led by Susie again, she's the new CEO, are doing great work on it. So do check out their website, have a look at their portfolio of work and what they're doing. Again, another non-profit organisation. So I've been very bullish about Bitcoin. However, Bitcoin is still just a small percentage of global wealth. If we look at the adoption curves, we can see that we're still very early. However, what we know is when innovations come along that improves things by orders of magnitude, those things get taken up and adopted. And I believe that Bitcoin is one of these things. So what does the future look like? I believe we're going to be living on a Bitcoin standard. What does that look like? I believe we'll be eventually valuing our time much more. We'll be able to save again. Who saves now? Nobody saves, we have to invest. But corny though it sounds, I think what will happen is we'll create a better world for Generation B. Thank you for listening. For those who are interested and like to experience Bitcoin on the Lightning Network for the first time, do download a wallet of Satoshi. Come and see me afterwards. And you also need to complete a survey. So there's going to be a little word about that later. Thank you very much.
Well done. That was like 9.5 minutes. Very impressive. Okay, Jules, get up here. So we're gonna do a quick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jules. I just want to say there's some seats up here if anyone's sitting at the back or standing at the back wants to come to the front. We are going to find out a little bit about your thoughts about Bitcoin. So. Yeah, okay, sorry. So this is just to do a little audience poll with you guys. So if you wanted to participate, we'd love you to. So please hold up to the QR code and you'll be taken to the survey. And the survey is totally anonymous. It's just for us right here. We can't see, so I'll just give you guys some time to hold up your phones and load that up because you won't see it again. Okay. Few more? Okay, right. So first question. Who here holds Bitcoin? So it's anonymous. Say that again? Oh, well, we've got about 37 people, so we managed somehow, but thank you. So if you want to hold up your hands, that's great when we're doing yes and no's. Sorry about the Wi-Fi. So we've got about 24 people saying 25, 26, and one's planning to. Whoever you are. So have you ever used Bitcoin to make a purchase online or in person? For everyone who didn't done that, do you want to raise your hand? Done that?
I think that's what yeah.
So a little bit more. So we've got people moving from the no to the planning to, right, Chris? That's what you want to see. What percentage of people in the UK do you think hold Bitcoin? Less than 5%, 5 to 10%, 11 to 20%, or over 21%?
What is it?
Okay. Who thinks they know the answer to this? Who wants to shout it out? Boy, sorry, in the green. 5 to 10. Okay, so I'm told it's 6%. So well done to those in 5 to 10%. So now up to 3 words, if you'd like to please describe what does Bitcoin mean to you? If you just fill that in, we'll see it pop up here. So a risky innovation, honesty, a mathematical framework, rumor, disruption, decentralized, fairness, store of value, security, presence, future, coin, justice, equity. I think there's a screen at the back if you can't see it up at the front. So thank you for that. So which of these best describes your interest in Bitcoin? Investment, technology or innovation, financial freedom, privacy, curiosity, or I'm not interested. So financial freedom is
people on
tech innovation. So a little bit of a tie with the first 3 across. Thank you. And do you think that Bitcoin will be widely used in everyday life in 10 years' time? Yes, no, or you're not sure? So that's good. That's what you want to see. Okay, so we've got 18 yeses there, so the majority yeses. Thank you. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jules. All right, guys, without further ado, because we do have quite the panel today, I'm going to call Toby. Where's Toby from Ordinal Spot? Toby is our moderator today. So, Toby, I will give it to you and you take it away.
Yeah, so everyone welcome. So I think we've got a great panel today on pizza protocols and the future of money. So I'd like to ask everyone, Susie, Francesca, Nat, and Sam, to come up to the stage. As we heard earlier, I actually educate my daughter about Bitcoin sometimes, and we especially this talk that I was giving that was quite exciting. She liked a pizza every Friday night, and I basically said, "Did you realize that many years ago, someone bought 2 pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin, which is circa about $105 million today. So it's kind of mind blowing. But I think we're going to dive in with all of the panel. I'm sure many of you have heard them speak and talk to them before about sort of why on earth this happened and sort of how 2 pizza became $105 million and what's so exciting, what's the promise that we're going to see from Bitcoin and where it's going. So obviously Nat, my co-conspirator, I think this is one of many panels we've been on together. How are you doing? What does Bitcoin mean to you, Nat?
I think I was actually I wasn't surprised, but like the middle word that came up there was freedom. Yeah.
You guys have to share the mic, by the way, because they won't be able to.
Sorry, I think the main thing that it represents for me is freedom. Yeah, freedom of if you want to call it the system or freedom and autonomy. We can choose to do our own thing. We have a opt out. It's called the orange pill for a reason, right? Morpheus offered the red and the blue pill. And a lot of Bitcoiners decided to set the orange one instead. That's it, right? It's like, do our own thing. So yeah, I'll say freedom is probably the top term for me.
No, brilliant. And Sid, you're obviously here from Maple Finance, a great sort of DeFi platform, I think. So would love to find out more about you and also what Bitcoin means for you.
Yeah, I'm a finance guy, a recovering investment banker, I would like to say. And that meant I studied economics and I spent a lot of time looking at money and what it means, right? Like that's kind of the first task you do. And the more we studied it and the more we saw the history, I think it was in the keynote speech, done really well. Most fiat money has failed. And basically the same thing happens throughout history. So I was a student at the time, and when I learned about Bitcoin, it seemed to solve a lot of the problems that money has as a definition. And so to me, it's the purest form of money, is how I would describe it. And it brings back it brings back a lack of reliance on intermediaries or specifically banks. So I talked to my parents who knew nothing about finance. It never occurred to them that the money in their bank account is not there. The bank has lent it out, doing something with it. You have no idea what they're doing with it. If you went back to try and get all of it out of the bank, they probably wouldn't be able to give it to you today. And so this idea that they could store value, hold their wealth without relying and trusting someone else blindly, I managed to convince my whole family to own Bitcoin as a result.
Nice.
Incredible. I'm still struggling with that this year, but I do try and fill it hard. But anyway, Francesca, obviously you're a venture capitalist and angel investor, sort of, but deep in the crypto space. What does Bitcoin mean to you?
Thanks for having me. For me, very much Bitcoin is synonymous with the Web3 space. And when we talk about crypto more widely, it's also ubiquitous in nature. I mean, Bitcoin to me is the allowance of stability, freedom, a lot of the expressions that we shared. But I think it's important to take one step back because prior to getting to the investment space, I had worked as a financial journalist for a well-known publication and had studied and saw the evolution of Bitcoin since 2014. And to me, coming from a country where fiat and the economy was stable then, very much was in tow with skepticism in the space. And it's very much turned me into a fervent believer after doing much research and knowledge and entering the venture capital space and observing projects. A lot of the projects that I'm working with as an advisor at the moment are from countries that very much when we talk about hyperinflation, inflation, countries in which really there is no free-flowing access to assets and cash. It's become do or die. And I think it's very important to point that out, that we are currently in a setup or in a society in which this is considered technology and innovation a luxury, but not everyone has that setup. So important to keep in mind nonetheless.
Susie, you're obviously a policy advocate and journalist. So would love to find out sort of a bit more about what why you're doing this? Why are you holding our politicians to account on Bitcoin?
So the most important thing to note is the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And that's something that our regulators don't understand at the moment. And I think it's leading to a lot of harm. So what we want to do is just make sure, I mean, crypto are VC companies and Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol. That's not to say that the VC companies don't have a place, but they're just not the same thing. And we need to have that differentiation so people understand what it is. So that's what it's basically helping them and educating them and being there as a think tank. But what Bitcoin is to me is freedom money.
And Sam, obviously, you're with one of these Buhis VC-backed companies.
Oh, they've got their place. I'm just saying they're different.
But I hold my hand up. I'm with a VC-backed company. I think Maple is as well, right? So we've got a VC on that panel, so we could probably delve into the crypto BTC debate at some point because I think it's very interesting. But obviously, like Rootstock's been an early innovator in Bitcoin DeFi, and what is that, and why are you doing it?
Yeah, for sure. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
First of all, I guess like Bitcoin for me, separating the infrastructure and the asset, like Bitcoin, the asset, the hardest money ever. I think the talk that was given before completely covered that. And then you have the network of Bitcoin. And that's the most unstoppable, uncensorable financial infrastructure that's ever existed in the world. And Rootstock emerged out of Argentina back in 2015 because people in Argentina were facing the pain of fiat currency in a way that we haven't seen in the West. Hyperinflation, capital controls, and they turned to Bitcoin as an answer to that. And they realized they need to be building infrastructure on top of Bitcoin that could replace everything that the traditional system offered to them today. So borrowing, lending, saving. And that's where I came from learning about Bitcoin and the impact it can have on the world. That's what got me really involved and invested in what I can do for everyone.
Very cool. And I guess, yeah, so we're on the sort of the history of the sort of Bitcoin pizza day. So I guess what we should really be talking about is kind of how like 6% of UK people are using it, but we heard about the Lightning Network and everything else. I guess some Bitcoin skeptics might say Bitcoin doesn't actually ever really get used. It's probably unfairly, but like at the same time, the argument goes that it hasn't really become digital money. It's kind of become more like a store of value, a bit like gold. And I think a lot of people here are trying to do something to make sure that it isn't just a store of value, but and many people around the world think it should just be a store of value. So like where do we sit on, I guess, like the maxi versus non-maxi debate? Because the so-called maxis, I think, depending on who they are, but like there are some that really think it should just be gold and not that innovative. And obviously we saw this beautiful sort of Satoshi putting the Times newspaper headline into Bitcoin right at the beginning. But where's Bitcoin going? And I guess in a long question, sort of let's start with that.
I mean, I don't believe that Bitcoin is just a holding. I think it's a bit of a short-term view. If no one is using Bitcoin, there's nothing being contributed to the Bitcoin miners that are securing the network. And if they're not securing the network, there's no security or decentralization to the network. So people need to be using it. They need to be spending it. They need to be using it in DeFi protocols. And they need to be replacing it because it's the best place to save. I think people get hung up with, if I spend it and then Bitcoin increases in value against my fiat currency, I'm losing out. But you can spend it and replace it, and then you're not losing anything. Yeah. So I think that's a really important thing for me. I don't think it can just be a store of value. It has to have function beyond that. And I think some of that can come on the base chain, and some of that will come on these layer twos, like Lightning Network and like Rootstock. where it's more functional and easy to use, but still goes back to the base chain and contributes to it. That if you think about it like long term in the future, I don't want to get really deep into it. Like Bitcoin on the main network is like gold when fiat currency was pegged to gold, and layer twos are a representation of that. So there's always the Bitcoin in the main network, and the layer two is almost the fiat of the Bitcoin world, if that makes sense, in a positive light because it's pegged to the Bitcoin at any one point. And I think people use layer twos, and then the bank vault will be the Bitcoin on the layer one, in my opinion.
I think Bitcoin is for anyone, and it has to be available so people can build on it and come up with solutions. I think everything will bleed into Bitcoin eventually. I think, Chris, you said 55% dominance, but I think it could be closer to 64.
It's 64.
Dominance. And as everything does bleed into Bitcoin, we're going to need more solutions of people building on it because the base layer will not cope with it. So it's going to be absolutely essential. I don't have a problem with VC companies, but I do think that providing the base layer remains sufficiently decentralized, and there are some short-term issues with that I think people should be aware of. I won't go into it here, but it's not perfect. But providing the base layer stays decentralized, I think that Bitcoin is for anyone. So we should, and we need builders. Like everyone should be building on Bitcoin. Yeah.
And again, I wasn't really digging at the comment. It just stuck in my head that you were passing over to the rootstock representation. The history of VC and crypto and Bitcoin. I guess this is teeing up Francesca perfectly, almost like how do investors sit? Because it's sort of one of the great things about sort of, I guess, Bitcoin and crypto generally, right? Like is the institutional investor has kind of faded into the background somewhat, and especially on Bitcoin. And sort of, how do you view that landscape? How are sort of builders and crypto and Bitcoin? How are they all interacting?
Yes. So as the two panelists spoke before me and teed it up very nicely, certainly within the last 18 months, there's been a lot of builder activity and excitement, especially when we see what's been going on in the news. I remember most recently, I had been the lead Bitcoin accelerator at Outlier Ventures, which is the largest Web3 accelerator in existence, dominating the space. And within that, it was pegged to two major events, one in which the SEC had lifted regulations, and secondarily for the second cohort is when President Trump won his re-election. So exciting times in that respect if you follow the space closely. But when we say a purist debate, whether should we be using and counting Bitcoin as digital gold, so to speak, or does it have a place? Certainly, like Susie had mentioned, yes, because we've seen innovation evolve with scalability and composability. And certainly within that, which I'm sure we'll get into more deeply, is the use cases on DeFi and how it's become such a strength within that. And Lightning has been brought up a couple times. So I'm sure we'll delve more into that. But within that, lots of innovation is already taking place. And certainly with companies building in the asset issuance space, I know, Toby, we tried to coach you and have you work with us, but turned us down. It's okay. But certainly there's a lot of excitement within that. And as Susie pointed out most poignantly, yes, there's a lot of momentum enthusiasms for people building in the Bitcoin ecosystem, if you will. And I can confidently say anecdotally as well, that's not going to change. Especially having attended a series of conferences. The last Bitcoin specific conference I had attended was Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, and that had changed dramatically since a year prior. So we're only going to see more builder activity and a tick on boards, I believe.
Yeah, and I think we might come to Bitcoin 2025, which is just around the corner shortly. But I'd love to dive in. Obviously, Sid Maple's a well-known DeFi company. Like how important is Bitcoin to your business, and is it largely wrapped Bitcoin, or are you doing stuff on Bitcoin Layer 1 as well, or linked to Bitcoin?
It's a great question. One of our biggest differentiators, and for those who don't know, Maple's business primarily is to lend stable coins against Bitcoin to folks who want to borrow and use fiat money without needing to sell their coins. Oh, sorry. And specifically, from my experience being here for 3 years, what I found is that the volume of institutions, and that's the main part I can speak to, who are coming to us to access financing against their Bitcoin has just increased exponentially, which is why our business is growing. This actually extends through to retail, even though we don't face them directly, but we fund platforms that allow retail individuals like you and me to borrow against their Bitcoin as well. Think of it like a mortgage on your house. So rather than sell your coins, you post it, you get 50% of the value back in dollars, and you can go and do other things with it. That represents a couple of things to me. The first is this perception of people wanting to keep hold of their coins, right? And it goes a little bit to some of the attitude of I can't replace it if it keeps going up in price, but it's also because from a financial perspective, this is one of the best forms of collateral that we could possibly take. And the regulators are miles behind on this, but our thesis has always been you can't get a better asset to back a loan than Bitcoin. And we think that's going to continue to be believed and grow. And to your question, we take native Bitcoin on the Bitcoin base chain, if you will. In general, we're slightly skeptical of wrapped forms. I think they can work, but we have been slightly skeptical in the past because it introduces a layer of counterparties and intermediaries again, which frankly not everyone wants, and is slightly moving away from the core philosophy.
Sid, can you tell us what wrapped is? Because I don't think everybody
yes.
knows what that means.
Wrapped Bitcoin is where you send your Bitcoin somewhere where it is custodied, and you get a tokenized representation of it on chain. What that means is that you can use your Bitcoin on other layer 1 networks, so think Ethereum that you may have heard of, Solana and others, and make it composable within the broader crypto ecosystem rather than just needing to use Bitcoin in and of itself. But the last thing I'll say is on the topic of the Bitcoin conference last year. We went last year to Nashville. This year we're going to Vegas, and the crowd is going to change again. I would say almost a vast majority of the largest financial institutions in space are looking at it now. And that's the main thing we've noticed ever since Trump got elected. Obviously, the ETFs have gained a lot of traction. Corporate treasuries are actively looking to buy this and hold it on the balance sheet, which goes all the way back to the original point made here that people are beginning to see this in the store of value form as the thing to save it, right? You can save in it yourself as an individual, but companies are saving in Bitcoin as part of their overall corporate management.
Yeah, no, fascinating. And just obviously, like, how do you provide people yield against their Bitcoin? And also, what risks are people taking in yield against their Bitcoin? I think the vast majority of Bitcoins are not seeking yield pairing activities. Like how do you manage that as well?
So, great question.
Yeah.
To borrow against your Bitcoin, we think of it as an over-collateralized loan. So if you have $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, one Bitcoin, slightly more now, you get $50,000 against that. The value of Bitcoin falls and we get closer to that original loan amount, then we require you to add more Bitcoin to your margin account, same as if you were borrowing against stocks or anything else, to keep that loan healthy. Of course, we as the lender are bearing the risk that you default on your loan. The other interesting thing that you mentioned there, what I've talked about so far is borrowing against Bitcoin to get dollars, which is our main business. But we've been looking at earning a yield on your Bitcoin natively. And to do that, we actually partner with some of the scalability solutions that have already been talked about. The one we talk to is called Core Network, who have an interesting mechanism where they've built a layer 1, which is a new type of crypto blockchain. But because they recognize the value of Bitcoin's economic security and proof of work's benefits, they require you to stake your Bitcoin. And I can go into details as needed. But in short, you have to put up some Bitcoin as security to validate their blockchain. So this is a really good example of people building on top of Bitcoin in order to facilitate things like smart contracts and some of the other things you might have heard of in crypto, while still relying on Bitcoin as the base network that gives you the security that everyone loves from the asset.
Really fascinating. Anyway, so Nat, obviously, like you've been in the Bitcoin space a long time. Kind of obviously always a great advocate for people doing innovative things with their Bitcoin. Like, how do you think things have evolved? It seems like there's a lot of momentum for sort of people doing more innovative things, as well as, like, I guess, sort of Bitcoin getting brand awareness, adoption. Like I guess it's really been leading the pack for most of the last few years. So I'd love to get your view.
Well, I think overall Bitcoin kind of just does what it does, right? And I think once you get to understand it, and you get to understand what Bitcoin is, what it was built for, and where it's going, it's kind of like, okay, this is the play, the ultimate play. It's kind of like what Susie said, you know, the Web3 crypto space, I have to say, it always gets eaten by Bitcoin, right? But that's what's happening. Bitcoin's just going around, just eating absolutely everything in the financial space. And what I've definitely seen over the years is a shift towards interest more in Bitcoin as people start to discover what has actually been happening on Bitcoin. Because what kind of shocked me, let's say, since 2021, the amount of people that came in that didn't even understand anything about Bitcoin. Because the era I come from, you had to understand Bitcoin. You didn't even want to try and mess around with anything else because it was like, hey, I don't even get what this one does yet, right? So for me, what I've seen is that a lot of the stuff that's happened in the general crypto space is culturally is bleeding over into Bitcoin. So things like NFTs, things like ordinals, things like what we're doing with like 2140 Music, bringing musicians into the space, just cultural everyday payments with Lightning networks and what Bridge to Bitcoin and Market and those guys are doing with getting payments into vendors. People realizing that, hey, wait a second, we did an event with Crypto Mondays with Kaylin and Bridge to Bitcoin, just to show people that, hey, look, you can actually use Bitcoin to go and buy yourself a beer and something to eat or some clothes or whatever you want to buy, right, in a local vendor. Had anyone raise their hand if they found a shop somewhere in London that accepts anything but Bitcoin? Right. So that's all I need to say, right? There's the cultural shift is happening, but people ain't noticed because they're so wrapped up in watching all of the shiny stuff, I like to call it, right? Yeah. And along with some of what Susie was saying about the VC stuff, again, VCs, yes, and funding and these mechanisms do need to somewhat be in the Bitcoin space, right, to a degree. But at the same time, the reason why it isn't, and I wrote a few LinkedIn posts about this as well, is because the Bitcoin culture and the ethos and the way that it works just doesn't really match up, right? It doesn't really match up. But at the same time, what we're seeing is that old school Bitcoiners, like OGs who have got like tons of Bitcoin, are like now saying, hey, we need to invest this Bitcoin into something. Yeah. And they are primarily looking for Bitcoin projects. They are primarily looking for things that are building better with Bitcoin. I was speaking to Susie earlier on about development, right? Like a lot of the bigger players that have been around for a long time, they are interested in technical solutions for Bitcoin, right? So it doesn't mean that there's not social or community things that are able to get investment. But what it means is that they are more worried about the network itself continuing to grow and to permeate every single thing, right? So they're thinking with a technical and also financial and revolutionary mindset. I say I speak to 90% of people in the space and they're like, hey, how do we make more money? Yeah. So it's like a lot of fiat games, and that's what I like to call it. Like I say to Susie all the time, we talk about it all the time. Fiat games, right? Like, that's not what this is here for, right? And eventually, as we know, trading and all the rest of this stuff becomes a zero-sum game. And then people will be left with, holding the short end of the stick, so to speak, right? But you just need to uncover what has happened in Bitcoin in the last 4 or 5 years, right? Of what's going on in just a cycle space, not 2, not 3, not 4 cycles that we've seen, just in the last cycle. And then some of the facts that Chris talked about earlier on with the adoption of Bitcoin, and you can quite clearly see there is no need to do lots of technical analysis or speak to a mate or watch 100 crypto channels. You can quite clearly see what's going on. So the thing that I would say to everybody is, if you want to be a part of the change and really be a part of the change, educate yourself on Bitcoin. Not Bitcoin only. If you want to educate yourself on whatever else you want to do, it's fine. Right? Bitcoin is for everyone, right? But educate yourself on Bitcoin from a standpoint of Bitcoin first. Yeah. Learn how to run a node. They cost like 100 quid. I'm sure people buy more of other whatever unicorn fart dust than that, right? Yeah. Right. So, you know, spend 100 quid, 150 quid, go and buy yourself a Raspberry Pi or buy yourself a pre-built node, learn how a Bitcoin node works. Then you're actually part of the network. Then you're actually part of securing the network. Then you can actually route your own payments. You can become your own bank, because that's all we've been saying since before the pieces, right? So the things that for me that have changed over the years is it's much easier for everybody to be able to do this, right? So you shouldn't be ignoring it, because it should be the number one thing on your mind.
And I think lots of really good points there. And I think what it comes back to me, I'm going to refer back to the Great Pizza Day. It's like firstly, it occurred to me in being questioned to all the panelists is like, would you have spent 10,000 Bitcoin back then on 2 pizzas? Or actually, let's do a show of hands. Like, who would have bought 10,000 Bitcoin to help kickstart the innovation to buy 2 pizzas? Nice.
If your hands down and you said you wouldn't have bought 2 pizzas, you're lying. You know, you know you're lying, right? Straight up and down.
Yeah. Now, would you buy 2 pizzas with 0.0002 Bitcoin?
0.00.
Which is roughly $20.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, I'll still do
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So exactly. So
that. Exactly. What do you want me to do with it?
well, it's interesting, right? Because people ridicule Paul Laszlo for using 10,000 Bitcoin, and I kind of feel what's interesting, and I sort of think about this a lot, is that they're only being what's I think when people begin to really understand Bitcoin, and we can maybe delve a bit more into like the basics of Bitcoin 101 kind of thing, like in terms of like there being 21 million Bitcoin, given the scale of adoption and the amount of people getting interested in Bitcoin, and sort of it feels like there's a kind of tipping point that more and more people, like 6% of people in the UK starting to own Bitcoin. You can easily imagine that going up to 12% and then 24%. Is is the game theory of Bitcoin inevitably victorious in the long run, or is it going to get superseded? I guess we're in the slightly Bitcoin Bitcoin panel, but I don't know.
It's the OG. There's no disputing.
Yeah, it's like I think there is a bit of like I talk to friends about this all the time. I think there's a bit of psychological barrier, a bit like we're just trying to say how much is a pizza now. I would say 20,000 sats, but for people who aren't in Bitcoin, they're like, I'll never own a Bitcoin. It's £100,000, and they don't understand that there's fractions of a Bitcoin that can exist. And then I'll let we were talking about this earlier as well, and it was one of my friend's birthdays a few days ago, and he was like, oh, it's too late now, I've missed the boat. So I made him download a Lightning wallet. I sent him 10,000 sats or something, and said, there you go, you're on the train now, like, see where it goes. Like, and it can be that easy just to get into it for the first time, show people what it's about.
You'll get pissed off with the sense of gold.
Yeah, or he'll spend it on pizza and he won't replace the sats.
You know what? I was laughing, right? Because I'm thinking about the current debate that's going on in the Bitcoin space. I don't want to confuse too many people right here, but there is a debate about, Bitcoin and sats and the denominations and how it works out, right? But it's 2.1 quintillion Satoshis, right? In the total supply of Bitcoin, right? So if you just want to think about, you know, if one Satoshi was $1, this is how I'd like to say to people, if one Satoshi was $1, we'd have more money than we've ever created ever in the whole history of humanity, right? And there'll be enough for everybody to go around. So just think about it like that. Very simple.
Do you guys want to do Q&A?
Yeah, let's,
Let's see how-
any of the audience, please, feel free to ask a question.
I'm gonna go to the back. Some questions in the back.
Hi there, my name's Alex. I'm a great advisor. My one question that I have, sorry, can you guys hear me right?
Yeah.
My one question, I've been searching for this answer, I've said this to a lot of people when I quite well answer, yeah. But looking back throughout the history of I can't quite see an example of anything of the first version of anything being the version that everyone used. If you look at the internet, the first version was Google, everyone used Google. The smartphone, everyone uses the iPhone first. And so for me, I struggle to wrap my head around Bitcoin being what everybody comes towards. When it's
Chris did actually explain it. He said it's not the first version. There was 40 years of innovation before it got to Bitcoin. There was a really amazing, I know he went through really quickly, so you probably were just like, oh my God, too much Bitcoin information, but there was a really amazing tree that went back 40 years that showed all the different innovations that were tried and tested and had to happen. So it really isn't the first. But what's amazing about it is it's never been hacked. It's the only system that hasn't, and the more you attack it, the stronger it gets. It's anti-fragile. So that's another amazing, because everything that we have at the moment is designed, like antivirus, is to keep things out, but Bitcoin is designed to be attacked and get stronger. And it's never been hacked. It's incredible, with 99.9% uptime.
And well, I was just going to follow up with that. If anyone wants to, and maybe Nat, you can chip into it. Like I think it is. I mean, if this was another crypto conference that wasn't called like Bitcoin Pizza Day, I think there would be a lot of people popping up and going, well, like the transactions per second on Solana or Base or whatever it is, right? Like whatever your flavor, they'd be arguing for that. Like what? I don't know, Nat, if you want to chip in on this or someone else, but like what do you think of? What should we think about all these sort of new cryptocurrencies and clearly like there's a degree to which we've been talking a bit in this panel. Is like Bitcoin's trying to learn from Ethereum, it's trying to learn from Solana. What
Bitcoin's trying to learn from Ethereum. Have you seen a chart again as a pair? Bitcoin and Ethereum, it just goes down. Bitcoin is going up. Stop. Oh.
I was just gonna say, right, that we've got this saying, right? Yeah, and I'm sure everybody in here already knows it if you've been around for a while, but ETH is testnet, isn't it, right? And I think like that's been proven where we are at, right? Like ETH has been testnet, it's been a very good testnet. Thank you, Vitalik. It's time to go home. Do you understand? Right? That's it. Like with Solana, yeah, Solana is exploring, you know, how much time we could spend in the casino having fun. Pretty much it. Like there's very few look, right? And just what you said, 40 years of innovation to Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin introduces what we call a blockchain, right? Today, right? In popular terms, right? And yes, there was very many things built around the mechanisms that could have created a blockchain before that. Well, it was called a linked list before that, right? Bitcoin comes along, creates a decentralized, distributed ledger, and then it creates a thing called a blockchain. And one of the very simple first rules of blockchain, anywhere, on any blockchain, is that the longest, most consensus version of the chain wins. What chain is the first chain? Did you say that still got what? Half an hour up or downtime is the longest time it's been down? Stronger than your Sky or your Virgin or your like, what are we talking about here, right? Like, so that's what I'm saying. It's just paying attention. That's all it really is. Like,
Just to add to that as well, not to get into super technical, most of you probably know this already, but there's different consensus mechanisms to secure different blockchains. Proof of work is by far the strongest and most superior and the most connected to the real world we live in as well, in terms of you having to use your hard-earned energy to produce blocks on the blockchain. And that's why I think Bitcoin kind of stands sort of chains out there.
Can I just say that you nailed it. Proof of work connects the real world to energy. And at the moment, our money isn't connected to energy. We haven't been connected to energy since 1971. So if you have a money that has no value or isn't connected to anything, then it's always going to warp society. And that's exactly what our fiat system is doing, which is why Bitcoin is special. It is the innovation, not blockchain. People will say, "Oh, blockchain's the innovation." No, that was around like decades ago. Bitcoin is the innovation. It's the finite supply with the proof of work, and that's what makes it special.
Really round of applause for the man that asked the question, really. Question?
And just interested, sort of, if anyone had a take on like the energy side of things. But I think that also worries people as well, right? Like Bitcoin is a perfect driver of like energy consumption, but is that necessarily a good thing?
This is like one of my favorite subjects, actually. So what's amazing about Bitcoin, I think every sentence should start like that, is that you can actually mine Bitcoin off methane. So the fact is, if you plug a miner into your wall, the electricity is too expensive and you're not going to make any money. So the only way that miners make money is to go and look for the cheapest version of energy. And that's often stranded or wasted. So I'll give you a really good example. In the UK, we have wind turbines everywhere, and sometimes you'll only see a couple of them turning and you'll wonder why. And it's because they don't want to overwhelm the grid. They have to build out the grid to max capacity. So to not overwhelm the grid, they switch some off. That's called curtailment. That curtailment costs us £1 billion a year, and it's going on to our high energy bills that are the highest in the world, I think. So not only could the government keep all of those windmills moving and mine Bitcoin rather than pay to turn it off, they would generate an extra revenue stream. They would save the curtailment costs. Our energy bills would get lower because it makes sense for them to find wasted and stranded energy. It doesn't make sense for them to fire up a coal plant and mine from that. And there are examples of this happening in Texas, and it's incredible. They use Bitcoin mining for demand response and to balance the grids, and it saves a lot of money. And when you think that you can actually mine from methane, you're turning something that has a real, I think it's 80 times more warming than CO2. And usually what they do is they burn the methane, create the CO2, and then they release that into the atmosphere. With Bitcoin mining, you can actually capture it, turn it into energy, turn it into money, and you're securing a financial network with something that was a problem. So the innovation that's going in around the mining space is insane. And it's actually going to build out lots of energy solutions because Chris mentioned it in his presentation. There are actually villages in Africa that can now switch on lights because they can turn hydro that would be otherwise a wasted source of energy into electricity. The electricity powers the village. With the excess, they mine Bitcoin, which they then put into infrastructure, which then builds out more lights. And it's insane. The innovation is absolutely insane. Bitcoin is very cool. You should look at it.
I was going to say,
You could go carbon. No, I think net zero is a load of nonsense. But like, you could go carbon negative.
this is what happens if you have 6 Max on a panel. So, time for one more question.
So
Yeah.
expensive.
The
Yeah.
initial talk said that there's Bitcoin and then everything else is crypto. So I was just wondering how the panel would categorize the forks of Bitcoin. I mean, would you categorize those as crypto, and if so, why?
Oh, no. You know what?
There's a lot of energy coming from this.
Go on, go to the-
Francesca hasn't had a question, but I'm keen to chip in.
I'll defer to the others that are more
Um,
excited to answer.
For family friendly response, I remember when Bitcoin Cash came about, and one of my very good friends said to me, effing Roger and Craig, they messed everything up. That's my defining memory of Bitcoin Cash. Big, and it was like for people, if you were around in 2018, it was kind of like that moment where like it was especially when Craig and Roger decided to fall out and do their own like version of like what real Bitcoin Cash was. And frankly, I just think there's like what's really interesting is like we came to it from like an ordinals perspective, which was like suddenly a lot of like tech innovative people pivoted and started building stuff on Bitcoin layer one because you suddenly could in a really easy and elegant way after a development called Taproot. And interestingly, quite a few of those pivoted from Bitcoin Cash, Cardano. We were pivoting from Stacks. It's kind of like there's a whole, like I almost feel like Vitalik, as many people possibly know, that what used to be the editor of Bitcoin Magazine. So there's kind of I think there's definitely a lot of continuity between the different people within crypto, but the penetration of the Bitcoin Cashes, I think it's just too low, and a lot of people feel very betrayed by that development that caused a schism within Bitcoin. So that's my person.
But their crypto is the answer. Yeah, they're crypto because they have a leader and the code is centralized and it's very easy to make changes to the protocol. It's not a decentralized protocol that has to change by consensus, and the consensus is very centralized.
I know Toby named him, but I was gonna say he shall not be named. Yeah, because I'm sure that like living in London with he who shall not be named, some of you have seen some of his events and his advertising and been around and gone there, right? And you know, all of the Bitcoiners were screaming for years, this is where it was gonna end up, and now he who shall not be named is on the run, hoping that somebody doesn't actually name him. Yeah, right. So you know, it is what it is, right?
Well,
Like,
I'm hoping that someone does name him because he loves the fact.
yeah. He loves to be named, doesn't he? Right? Yeah. So look, right. In the end of the day, right? Like, in the end of the day, right? As I said in the talk that I was saying earlier, like, the Bitcoin blockchain that we see now, and even with the arguments with core and everything else, that's totally different. That's not a consensus change. But we've seen, right, that Bitcoin has, again, the longest version of consensus where everybody agrees that this is what it should be. Yeah, right. And no single actor can make it something else. And what we see everywhere else is single actors making it something else.
So,
That's why it's crypto.
on that note, guys, let's give a huge round of applause to our panel. Guys, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, we could keep going, but
Yeah, you know,
we've been up here a while. So I've just got two quick announcements before we adjourn. So, guys, we did a deal with Proof of Talk. If you guys know Proof of Talk, it's a premier event that takes place in Paris. Anyway, you can win a free ticket if you scan the QR code and be in it to win it. It's a great event. We will be there. And then, of course, we have our survey. So if you guys can see it. So if you guys want to get sats from Bridge to Bitcoin, just fill out the survey, show Chris that you've completed it, and he will transfer you Bitcoin. It's free.
How much?
No, I don't know. You'll have to ask him.
and it's magic.
And it's magic. So guys, thank you so much. There's pizza, there's drinks. We have this made from our Happy Bitcoin Pizza Day. Huge round of applause for the panel and for Chris. Thank you guys so much.